Welcome to another episode of the Confessions of a Recovering Landlord podcast, where you'll learn the secrets commercial landlords would prefer you not know. I'm your host, Jan Gibbons, along with my co-host and experienced commercial real estate broker, Bob Gibbons.
That's me.
Brought to you by Riata Commercial Realty, where we exclusively represent users of office and warehouse properties. Landlords have representation. Do you? Since hybrid work is here to stay, how will it be successfully implemented, and what does that mean for commercial real estate?
You know, I'm wondering that all the time.
Crystal ball time.
Well, it seems like I'm always reading something where everybody has a different opinion on this, right? But I was reading something in BizNow the other day about enforcement of hybrid, which I didn't like that characterization, enforcement of hybrid.
That's what it is. We're all basically children, just older.
Well, in a way, but they were talking about how whenever you implement a hybrid work system, that the work of enforcing that or implementing that or making it happen really falls to the mid-level management layer of companies. And that they're really the boots on the ground for this type of thing. And often they're not really given the proper tools to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the example we had talked about earlier, a couple of weeks ago, was a good friend of mine is a vice president at a large insurance brokerage here in town. And this is exactly her role because she has a team of, 4 or 5. And she's in the office about 4 days a week because she has to manage them. She has to make sure they're there. She has to check their work. She has to have meetings with them, hire, fire, all that. Mm-hmm. And when I talk about, she has pretty much disseminated her work to everyone on the team, but she still has a couple of accounts she runs. And she says, "Oh, no, Jan, when I have to work, I go home." It just cracked me up because she has to be there to make sure everyone else is working and that she facilitates them and gets them what they need and if they have a problem. So that's one part of her job. But then when she has an account she has to work, she does that at home where it's quiet and everything's set up and she can get real work done. So it definitely falls to middle management because CEOs are at home, they're traveling, they're in meetings around wherever. They're not doing this. This is the middle manager role.
Well, and you don't want a CEO doing that. I mean, the CEO's job is strategy and
vision.
Yeah, they shouldn't be implementing this kind of thing. But, this article talked about how these middle-level managers have this role and they have all these, the demands, the workloads, the personalities, the circumstances of various workers to deal with. And, they're the ones who benefit most from being in the office because, if their employees are in the office and they're in the office, it makes their jobs easier because it's a little more tangible. They're right there. So when you move that to Zoom, FaceTime, Microsoft Teams, et cetera, that makes it more difficult because now you're not there. You're not seeing them. You're not in the same environment.
We have a perfect example. Last week, it was what do they call it? Dalaska. The weather around town was Dalaska. I thought that was a cute hashtag. Anyway, it was Ice-mageddon again. And so we decided to go ahead and just have our normal status meeting via Zoom instead of meeting at WeWork like we normally do. And even though it's all the same people, we've been around each other for quite a while now. We're all very comfortable. It's not the same synergy as it is in that room. Where I'm like, "Oh, show me the picture of the new plant you put in. I love that. How are you caring for it?" It just, that little kick that happens when bodies are next to each other rather than over a Zoom call.
Well, and it's also because when you're in person, you have fully duplex communication, meaning I can hear what you're saying, you can hear what I'm saying at the same time, and those around us can too. And if all 5 of us are talking at the same time, you can hear it. You may not.
Which often happens.
Which does often happen with our crowd. But when you're on Zoom now, I'm sorry, what'd you say? It cuts you off, this and that. It's just not even remotely the same. But one thing I thought was interesting is that this article said that more than 40% of managers that were interviewed, I guess, they wanted the work to be in the office at least 3 days a week, if not more. And that's 40%. I mean, I was actually kind of surprised that it wasn't higher than that. And the only reason I figured it's not higher than that is because it's probably like your friend who's the VP, where she knows she wants to be at home to get real work done and to not have to
Mm-hmm.
deal with the commute. And yet she knows that her
Mm-hmm.
managerial position is much better accomplished in the office.
Well, because she's got to report to her higher ups about her supply chain down below her that, hey, Billy Bob's not working out. Sister Susie's doing pretty well. I mean, she still has to be in those meetings with her higher ups. So, and trying to inculcate how this hybrid policy is going to affect CRE, I want to know what this flex leasing term is I'm hearing about. I mean, when I hear flex leasing, I think, okay, industrial meets office with a little bit of warehouse and showroom.
Right.
But I don't think that's what they're talking about.
Not anymore. Again, we're taking terms and starting to mess with them a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But, flex has historically been sort of the office warehouse type product, office showroom type product.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of warehousey, but it's kind of office. There's, you could have anywhere from, 30% office to 100% office, and yet it's still considered a flex space. And, but now when people are talking about flex, like our friend Nick, who is in London, when I talk to him about flex, well, he's thinking that stands for flexible, not in terms of office
Mm-hmm.
versus warehouse, but in terms of flexibility of use. And so that's really more going toward the office sharing, the co-working, short-term leasing.
Mm-hmm.
And it really goes to what there was another article I was reading that talked about space as a service. So SaaS has always stood for software as a service.
Mm-hmm.
Now SaaS could be space as a service. And so the idea is,
I like snacks as a service. Is that going to become popular anytime soon? Because I really like working close to my kitchen.
Yeah, but I mean, space as a service is it's the ultimate goal of corporations, right? I mean,
mm-hmm.
There'd be nothing better than to have a month-to-month lease that is perfectly set up to accomplish your goals and objectives and looks the way you want it to and is in the location you want it to and all the rest. But how do you really make that happen and still have the identity and the branding and the sense of place and purpose that the company wants? And that's not so easy.
If it's space on demand, it sounds good. It's not practical.
Exactly, because somebody had to spend a lot of money to put that space in that condition. And whether it's the landlord that had to spend that and they therefore want a longer term lease to know they're going to get paid back for that, or whether the tenant spent their money and they want to know that they're going to get to use it for a long period of time and amortize that over a period of time. Whoever is paying for it needs time. And that was what was so strange about the co-working thing coming along, in that now you're spending this giant amount of money for improvements. And you have these long-term lease commitments, because like WeWork was signing 15-year leases and they were spending, I don't know the exact number, depending on where it is, but anywhere from $150 to $300 a square foot for improvements. And yet their underlying licenses, not leases, but licenses with their company, their clients were month to month in most cases. Now they could be longer, but that month to month. So you have this mismatch between long-term commitments and obligations versus short-term assets, if you will, because the lease or the membership is the asset, and those were very much not in sync in terms of timing.
On one thing that's causing people to retain more square footage than they might have headcount for is, like my friend I was just mentioning, the VP at a brokerage here in town. I was asking her one day, do you do hoteling or hot desking? And she's like, yeah, neither. Everyone has their same desk they had before COVID, before the pandemic, before hybrid. They just happen to come into it 2 to 4 days a week, but it's still their same desk, but their kid's picture and the plant their husband gave them, whatever. And that's really, I think, most ideal for the person coming into the office. It's not ideal for the person paying for the office.
Absolutely correct. I mean, whenever you have somebody coming in only a couple of days a week, if that, why should they have their own dedicated desk? That makes no sense from a space utilization perspective. And I don't know. I think that part of the reason that may be the case with her is because her company's lease hasn't expired yet.
Yeah.
So it'll be really yeah, when that lease expires and they have to decide, are we going to pony up for the same amount of space for the next 5 or 10 years? That's when the rubber meets the road. And I'm not so sure that's going to be the way they do it at that point.
So to get down into crunching numbers time, because of hybrid work, there are projections that office space demands down about 20%.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Is that accurate? And if so, why aren't landlords getting real?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right that there have been estimates that the demand for office space is going to drop by 20%. And, who knows what the real number is. That is basically calling up a bunch of people and saying, how much down do you think it's going to go down? And people throw out their number and you average it. So, there's probably not a lot of science to that at this point. But just based on the fact that how much sublease space has come on the market and watching how much companies are shrinking whenever they're shrinking. I mean, like this morning, I went to a broker event, if you will, where, a lot of times landlords will have a broker party where they'll say, hey, we just did these renovations of our building. We just built this new building, whatever. Come take a look at it. In fact, I have one of those tonight, downtown Dallas.
But isn't 8 o'clock in the morning early to be drinking, even for a broker?
Mimosas? No.
Who says I don't have fruit?
There was no alcohol there, but it was a come and go thing. So
and they still got brokers?
Between 8 and 11, it was come and go as you wanted to. And what was interesting is that it was a 25,000 square foot space that they were trying to sublease 18,000 feet of it. So they were thinking they were going to keep 7,000 feet, and they weren't even sure they were going to need that.
Whoa.
And so, so we're walking through the space, and me and these other two brokers, and then the person who is the listing agent broker was walking us through. And one of the other brokers that was walking with me said, hey, I've got a client that needs around 6,000 or 7,000 square feet. Would you consider showing us the 7,000 feet that you say your client wants to keep? And he said, I think that could very well be on the table. So I guess my point in saying that is that, here you have 25,000 feet that they already have identified 18,000 that they want to go. So they're going down to what, 20% of maybe 25% of what they had. And even that is on the table. We're hearing that kind of thing all the time. Mm-hmm. Major consolidations. We have a client that is trying to figure out what size they're going to be. And they're starting to talk in terms of not our division anymore, where each individual division makes their own decisions, but now they're coordinating with 2 or 3 or 4 other divisions of the same giant company to figure out how they can shrink. So before any division of a company can go out and get their own space, they have to look around the portfolio, if you will, of leased space that other divisions have to see if there's an opportunity to share space with them instead of incurring additional expense.
It's like my mama used to always say, shop in your closet first, honey. You probably already have what you need.
Well, with your mom's closet, that was really good advice.
I know with hers.
She had a hell of a closet.
She certainly did. So do you think flex leasing will become more widespread? I mean, are you even seeing landlords willing to offer shorter term leases of any length? Because when they say flex leasing, I think they're meaning 12 months or less. And we're having trouble getting landlords to say renewals at 2 years, maybe 3 years. You want ETIs, we got to look at 5 years.
I think landlords are desperately trying to keep life in a lane that they're comfortable with, that they're used to.
Yeah, stick your head in the sand.
Well, it is in a way. We went to a landlord last week and said, we want to extend our lease 10 months. And they're like, 10 months? That seems pretty arbitrary. And what I was trying to avoid was saying, yeah, this is for your lease in San Antonio. They also have one in Austin that expires in 10 months. So we're trying to make sure these are coordinated so that then if we want to, we can consolidate those two into a single lease in far South Austin that will serve both Austin and San Antonio.
We call that coterminous, just for those who are listening and checking their vocab.
Well, very good. So they, So the landlord came back to us and said, no, we can't do a 10-month lease, but we'll do 12 months. I'm like, okay, fine.
Close
we,
enough.
we can live with 12 months one way or the other. On the other hand, then I had a tenant come back. I'm sorry, a landlord come back to me today where we had asked for a shorter term, like 1 or 2 year extension. They said, nope, we want 3 years minimum. And if you want any TIs, tenant improvements, paid by the landlord, it's got to be a 5-year lease. And then they offered us $5 for improvements. $5 per square foot.
You can't even get your carpet steam cleaned for $5 a square foot.
I know it's absurd, but
funny.
Anyway, so we have a little, we need to do a little chatting there, but
are you going to have a staff meeting?
Ultimately, we are having a big issue because landlords are definitely not on the same page as what it appears all the market data is suggesting. At the same time that we're expecting huge increases in either foreclosures or deeds in lieu of foreclosure, basically the keys being given back to the lender on some pretty significant properties. And, it's already happened in Dallas and
Hines in Houston.
Hines in Houston
that was
is
a
doing
flagship.
it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other ones. There's a company called TREP, TREPP, and they have a podcast called Trepwire, which is a really good podcast, by the way. If anybody wants to listen to it, it's very
as
much
good as Confessions of a Recovering Landlord.
Nothing could quite meet that, but nonetheless, I was listening.
Flight to quality.
I was listening to it the other day, and they were talking about all these like trophy asset, major asset properties around the country that they're watching because they all have these expiration dates on their loans coming up in the next year or two. And, a lot of them are expecting that they're just going to hand and what's amazing is that they have pretty decent occupancies. They'll have occupancies in the 80s and even in the low 90s in some cases. And yet when the loan comes up, you have the problem of, all right, can we really get a loan? Because, with capital markets being what they are, the lenders are going to want a lot more money down. They're going to want a bigger buffer of the loan to value ratio at the same time that occupancies are not expected to be going up. And how much shadow space is there in the building, meaning space that's leased but not occupied. Therefore, those tenants are not renewing, at least not for the same square footage. So you have all these dynamics that are coming together at once, and it's going to be really, really hard for these people to refinance their properties unless they have long-term, high credit, high rent, situations. So I don't know. I don't think it's good for landlords, and ultimately it's not good for the health of the market overall. But if you need space, I would think a year or two from now might be even a better time to be negotiating than today. But honestly, I would have said the same thing a year or two ago.
Yeah. Something I was reading yesterday that I thought was interesting is everyone's talking about what will it take to lure my employees back to the office. And we're having, class A, class AA buildings that have a spa and a sauna and Kobe beef in the cafeteria. And we'll babysit your child and walk your dog and wash your car while you're at work. I mean, all these amenities, and they're front loading these buildings with all this. And the employees are going, I could care less about this. You know what I really want is high tech on my desk so that I can do my job more efficiently.
And no commute.
Well, that too, but they would be willing to come in if they have a really good working office situation. That was their number one wish, not all this other stuff. And so landlords have gone out there and purchased the garden wall and the waterfall and your e-bikes and all this stuff. And they're going to be upside down in those buildings and still not be able to lease them. So I am curious to see what's coming up in the next 12, 24 months.
Yeah. I mean, the amenities race was hot and heavy before COVID hit. And in fact, you and I were in California for the Alliance of Tenant Representatives conference last week. And one of the presentations was from a landlord that owns a lot of property in Southern California and was talking about the amenities they're doing. And one of the things that was really surprising to us was that they put in a swimming pool. I'm talking like an Olympic-sized swimming pool in an office park.
Gorgeous.
There's not a single apartment in that development. There's no retail in that development.
But it had a bar.
It
had a coffee bar and an alcohol bar.
It was not a swim up bar, though. They did drop the ball on that.
Nobody's swimming at those things.
It was pretty amazing. All right. Hey, I know we need to wrap this up here pretty quickly, but a couple of other quick things. I thought it was really interesting that the city of Arlington, Virginia, just instituted a new zoning change that allows for alternate uses for the adaptive reuse of office buildings. And I thought the Arlington County Board was brilliant to do this because, there's a lot of talk about conversions of buildings to other uses. In Dallas, we've seen office buildings being converted to apartments, to hotels, et cetera. And so this one is basically making a change across the board, not on a case-by-case basis, but across the board, and which basically allows by right conversions to other uses. And this is the part that was kind of funny, but also shocked me, was animal boarding facilities like doggy daycare, urban farms like the hydroponic farming that you see occasionally, colleges, universities, breweries and distilleries, artisan workshops. So they're going to basically just say, yeah, you can do any of those things in those buildings. Now, it probably comes with other things like assuming you have the appropriate parking and things like that. But that I found to be quite interesting and very forward thinking of the Arlington zoning board.
I don't know. Animal husbandry and Nova. I'm not seeing that go. Our daughter lives up there. She tells us what Nova's like, and I just don't see me bringing my Clydesdales in for our parking.
You remember the old movies from the 1950s where they had the elevator attendant, and the elevator goes up and it's like floor 5, ladies lingerie, floor 6, appliances. Well, this will be floor 7, animal husbandry, floor 8, hydroponic farms, floor 9, doggy daycare. I mean, it's
got to be adaptive.
And the other thing I was wanting to mention is that we are seeing a big increase in availability of subleases in industrial buildings now.
Which is not what we were hearing. It was all office.
Well, yeah, it has been all office, but
is this due to my best friend, Jeff?
Partially. Yeah, I mean, not just because of Amazon, although Amazon is definitely a contributor to this, but 46% increase in the amount of sublease space available.
That's crazy.
For this. So now I will have to say that the amount of sublease space available is still a drop in the bucket compared to office space that's on the sublease market. But we are seeing a lot more, and especially in spaces that have 200,000 square feet or more. So you're not seeing the subleases too much in the 20,000, 30,000 square footers, but the 200, 300, 500,000 square footers are bigger. And so anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting. So just another little FYI point of interest.
Because our shows are always packed with great information. Tune in next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. And just a reminder to send in questions to see if we can stump Bob.
Not going to happen.
We really appreciate your taking the time to tune into this episode. We would love it if you would give us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening to this on. And if you are on our YouTube channel, we would love to read your feedback in the comment section. Also, be sure to subscribe so you get notified when we publish new episodes. Thanks, and see you next time.
Bye.